As my companions waged their battles against Mephisto and Diablo, Baal set out across the twin seas to corrupt the Worldstone, and thereby all of humankind. With the whole of humanity turned to darkness, he would possess an army with a power beyond even that of the angels and demons, a fighting force capable of tipping the scales of the eternal conflict. It appears, however, that in order to fulfill his plan, Baal required the Amber Soulstone shard that has been used to imprison him so long ago by the Herodrim. As you might remember from earlier, the shard had been taken by Marius, the Dark Wanderer's former companion. Rather than follow Tyrael's orders to destroy the stone, Marius had fled to Westmarch. There, driven to the brink of madness, he had been arrested and confined to a sanitarium. It did not take long for Baal to track him down and acquire the Soulstone shard. Reports say that a raging inferno swept through the sanitarium around this time. Sadly, Marius' charred corpse was later found in the remains of the building. I can only assume that this act of destruction was Baal's doing. For quite some time I wondered why the Soulstone was so vital for Baal's plans, but I believe I now have the adequate explanation. Over the long centuries Baal was imprisoned, the stone became infused with its destructive essence. By melding this shard of destruction to the Worldstone, Baal knew that he could irrevocably corrupt the monolithic crystal. Having secured the shard, Baal marched north from Westmarch, butchering entire villages en route to Mount Ariad. Those who died were not granted peace. They were possessed and transformed into hideous demonic soldiers. By the time Baal reached Ariad, his unholy legion had swelled to the numbers of thousands. Some might question why Baal assaulted Ariad in force, if he could have reached the Worldstone through stealth and deception. From what I have gathered, every act of mayhem and wanton chaos committed by the Demon Lord and his minions bolstered the shard's destructive power. Thus, Baal intended to wreak havoc along his journey to ensure that when he reached the Worldstone, the shard itself would be pulsing with untold corruptive energies. Near Ariad's foothills, Baal contended with the barbarians. These fierce guardians had lived to protect Ariad for generations, believing that the holy heart of the world existed within the mountain. The barbarians had long venerated Bolcathos and other Nephilim, and they believed that the spirits of these ancients resided upon the lonely peaks of Ariad as a last line of defense against any who would threaten the sacred mountain. By all accounts, the barbarians fought ferociously, living up to their reputation as some of Sanctuary's hardest warriors. Yet, it was not enough to prevent the Lord of Destruction from storming across their lands and sacking their great capital of Secheron. Eventually, all that stood between Baal and Ariad's summit was Harrogath, a fortress nestled in the mountain's foothills. Reports suggest that the stronghold's elders grew desperate at the sight of Baal's marauding armies. To stave off annihilation, they sacrificed themselves to cast an ancient and forbidden warding spell, creating a protective barrier around the Harrogath. It was then that Baal's forces laid siege to the bastion. With Tyrael's aid, my brave comrades who had defeated Baal and Mephisto arrived at Harrogath amidst the chaos. Over the course of their journey, the heroes' numbers had grown. One newcomer who had pledged herself to the cause was an assassin of the Vijaktar, a secretive order created to hunt down and slay renegade sorceresses. Having foresawn the direct use of magic, the assassin donned exotic weapons and armor imbued with elemental energies. Another newcomer was a druid, who traveled far from the fabled woodlands of Skosklin. Prior to meeting this individual, I had read extensively from the ancient druidic tomb, Skalfada, and knew much about the druid's abilities to command the forces of nature and assume the forms of various beasts. The band of heroes did all they could to break Baal's demonic siege. Their efforts, however, were overshadowed by treachery. Nilathak, the only elder to have survived the warding ritual, believed that unless he made a pact with the Lord of Destruction, his people would be doomed. In exchange for the sparing of Harrogath, the elder provided Baal with a relic of ancients, one of the holiest artifacts in the barbarian culture. With the artifact in hand, Baal raced up the slopes of Ariat, bypassing the guardian Nephilim spirits and breaching the Worldstone's secret chamber within the bowels of the mountain. My allies followed in his tracks, clashing with the Demon Lord's minions, and even proving themselves worthy against Ariat's spectral Nephilim. Ultimately, they confronted Baal within the Worldstone's chamber and vanquished him in a ferocious battle that left them at the brink of death. Yet, as the heroes were horrified to learn, Baal had fused the Shard of Destruction with the Worldstone. All of the strife and horror that had accumulated within the shard had already begun spreading throughout the Gargantian crystal. When Tyrael arrived to assess the situation, he realized that these dark energies would soon echo through the hearts of all mankind, turning humans irrevocably evil and violent. And so, Tyrael did the unthinkable. He hurled his sword, Eldurin, into the Worldstone itself. In that moment, the object over which the eternal conflict had been waged, that had created Sanctuary and all its myriad forms of life, was shattered in a horrific explosion. The Worldstone's destruction was catastrophic. Baal's body was obliterated, and his spirit, I have come to believe, was flung into the abyss, just like those of the other primes. What remained of his demonic forces was utterly destroyed as well, and the surrounding area was devastated. To this day, toxic clouds of ash and choking arcane dust hang like a shroud over the land. The decimation was so utterly calamitous that this region is now known as the Dreadlands. What became of Tyrael after this event is unknown to me, but it is clear that his physical form, like Baal's, was disintegrated. Some fragment reports suggest that the Sword of Justice, Eldurin, survived the explosion and was thrown across the lands of Sanctuary. Rumors tell of a young mortal named Jacob, who later wielded the sword and used it to cleanse a curse that had taken hold around his home city of Stalbreak. Suffice it to say, dear listener, that from the time of Diablo's awakening beneath Tristram to Tyrael's destruction of the Worldstone, the narrative of men, angels, and demons was altered forever. This conflict saw the defeat of 5 of the 7 Lords of Hell. I cannot tell you how significant this is. For the past 20 years, I have traveled the darkening world and witnessed many things come to pass, waiting to see when these troubles would erupt once again. To be clear, 2 of the evils still live, Asmodan, the Lord of Sin, and Belial, the Lord of Lies. The end of days is coming, and I believe these 2 will play principal roles in the annihilation of our world. Also of great concern is a thought that has plagued me for some time. As we have seen, Tyrael is a noble being who has fought on the behalf of our kind time and time again. Yet, I am afraid that he is alone in terms of how his fellow angels view humanity. We have witnessed numerous demons and their lords walk this world, but I've heard little of the high heavens, or of the Anger's council that rules over them. There is something terribly unsettling about heaven's silence, and the unknown role that angels might play in the coming years.